The Washington Commanders enter Week 18 in a must-win situation, but can the Dallas Cowboys complete the series sweep? We'll break it down on this crossover edition of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today is David Harrison from Locked On Commanders. You can follow him on Twitter at X or X, whatever you want to call it, at DHarrison82. David, I want to start with the Commanders on this side of thing. We know they're in the playoffs. We know they're a wild card seed. We don't know the seeding yet. How big of a game is this for Commanders? And would you say it's a must win?
I mean, I think it's definitely a need to win, right? I don't know if I put it in the category of must win. And the reason is because you want to win this game, but I think they can survive if they don't win this game. It's just a much tougher road to kind of plow, right? So the difference here is if the Washington Commanders lose and the Green Bay Packers win on Sunday and they play at the exact same time, then the Washington Commanders fall to the final seed in the wild card race. Right now, they're number 6. They would fall to the last seed, which means you're going to Philadelphia. And of course, this is a team that they've already lost on the road against. It's a division rival. Now, they did beat them in a game in Washington recently. You know what I mean? So you have that little bit of confidence. And that's the reason I don't put this in the must-win category, because can the Washington Commanders beat the Philadelphia Eagles? Absolutely, they can. But I think when you look at the matchup, and you look at the fact that, you know, we all love and trust Jayden Daniels and his poise, but every single new milestone is kind of like, okay, is he still going to maintain that poise? And when you have that type of a situation, you would much rather see him go into a matchup where it just seems like the matchup is better suited. And going up against the Los Angeles Rams or going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers seems much more like a matchup that Jayden Daniels, if there is a little bit of rookie nerves with the first playoff game, would still be able to overcome. Whereas Philadelphia Eagles right now in the NFC, at least, you know, when Jalen Hurts is healthy and all this other stuff, they might be the team that's playing the best.
And not to take away anything from Washington's win over Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago, but Jalen Hurts did miss the entire second half of that game. And you wonder what the game would have looked like if it was Hurts playing and not Kenny Pickett. I think if you're a Commanders fan, you just want to avoid Philadelphia as long as possible. You know that you're probably going to have to play them at some point if you want to reach the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game. But playing the Rams, who are a good but flawed team, same with Tampa Bay. You know, they have a really good offense, a terrible defense. I feel like that's the goal. On top of that, I'm sure Dan Quinn wants to have this team playing well, winning, you know, continuing this winning streak going into the playoffs. My question for you is, do we think that the starters are going to play the game throughout, or do you think that Dan Quinn is going to kind of feel how this game is going and then maybe adjust the lineup as it's going on?
Yeah, I think that's the route that they're probably going to go. I think the starters come out, you know, Jayden and all those guys are going to play. But, you know, if they can get a 2-score lead, if the Dallas Cowboys, you know, all but roll over and give up, like, you know, there's just, listen, NFL players have a lot of pride, but NFL players who know that they're not playing for anything past this game check, you know, we're all human beings, you know what I mean? We all need some sort of motivation. So not to like down talk any of the Dallas Cowboys out there, but I was joking with another media member today. I was like, you know what Dan Quinn needs? Just have Micah Parsons come over to the sideline at some point and be like, hey coach, you're good. We're good. Don't worry about it. And then you can just put Marcus Mariota in, put the rest of the guys in, and let's just get everybody out of Week 18 healthy and go about our business.
That's not going to happen, by the way.
That's not going to happen. Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to happen. But, you know, it's one of those approaches where Dan Quinn says, look, we're absolutely coming after Dallas. We're absolutely going after that number 6 seed. And look, it fits the message, right? Dan Quinn's message all year long, before he even actually had his roster, you know, partially built, was we're going to be aggressive. We're going to compete anywhere, anyone, anytime. It doesn't matter what the context of the situation is. We want to win this week and we want to get better this weekend. And honestly, look, they beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is the reason why, you know, yes, they beat the Philadelphia Eagles. You're happy about that, right? It was the first time in the last 86 times that a team won a game with 5 turnovers and allowing 30 plus points. It doesn't happen very often. It's a very rare win to get that kind of a win. And then the very next game against the Atlanta Falcons, you have 12 penalties against you. You know what I mean? But you're still able to pull off that victory. So they want to clean some things up. So even if it's a Dallas Cowboys team that maybe doesn't have a lot of quote unquote things to play for, you want to go out there and see, can you play a clean game? Can you not turn the ball over? Can you get a full 60-minute performance? Because that's really what's been missing. As impressive as the Commanders have been all year long, Dan Quinn said it himself, we have yet to play a clean game in all 3 phases. And I think that's 100% accurate. If you have a chance to do that before you get to the postseason, you got to take it.
And we'll talk about the Cowboys' motivations going into week 18 in a little bit, but big picture for the Commanders, what do you think the ceiling of this team is? Like, do you view them as, a team that could maybe win a wild card game, or do you think they have a higher ceiling than that?
This season?
This season.
I think this is a team that can get to the NFC Championship game, honestly. Like, I'm not going to go as far as to maybe necessarily predict it, right? But I think you get to that wild card round. And again, the way that it looks, so the Washington Commanders are obviously going to come out here and try to beat the Dallas Cowboys. On paper, they should be able to do that. On paper, they should have been able to do it the last time. So let's not get too crazy there. But if they do that, they secure the 6th seed, right? The Green Bay Packers have plenty to play for. They're not going to lose the Chicago Bears. So they definitely need the Washington Commanders to get their own win. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be resting their starter, Sean McVay, all but confirmed that already this week. So I don't expect Matthew Stafford. I don't expect Kyron Williams, all those guys to be playing much, which means Seattle Seahawks, who are led by a first-year head coach, and first-year head coaches don't let their teams roll over and play dead. The Seattle Seahawks, I believe, are probably going to come in and beat the Los Angeles Rams because Sean McVay's not really that concerned about number 3 or number 4. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to beat the Saints in order to clinch the NFC South. So when you look at that scenario, I think most likely what's going to happen is the Rams are going to lose, the Bucs are going to win, the Commanders are going to try to win, the Packers are going to try to win, and the Commanders, if they pull that off, are going to end up playing in Tampa.
Mike McDonald with the Seahawks, right? Like, they're not going to make the playoffs, right? But I think he wants to have a 10-win season on his resume. I mean, that's a pretty good job that he did right away. My thing is, when you look at the rosters between like the Commanders and the Lions, the Vikings, the Eagles, I'm not sure they stack up, but they have the quarterback in place that gives you a chance every single week. To me, like, if I was a Commanders fan, obviously you're hoping that you can win a playoff game. But if that's all that happens, is they win one playoff game, I still think you have to be thrilled with that outcome this year.
Well, look at it like this. Like, so if you can beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I firmly believe that. I know the Buccaneers beat them in week 1, but I think that this version of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their offense is very, very electric, and that's going to be a problem for anybody who faces them. But you can beat them. They can beat the Los Angeles Rams, and again, they can beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And I look at the Minnesota Vikings, and look, I'm not trying to down talk any team in this conference or any team in this race necessarily, but I do look at the NFC North and kind of wonder how good are you really? The Detroit Lions, I think, are the best of the best when they're healthy, but they're not healthy. And they face, as a division, they face the AFC South, they face the NFC West. So a lot of their records, I believe, are inflated because of that fact. And then they play each other and they get a lot of hype from beating each other or beating up on each other. But again, if all the SEC teams are playing, the Mountain West Conference, and then they beat each other, how good is the SEC team really? Because the only competition they're really playing outside of themselves is not all that great. That's kind of how I look at the NFC North. I could be wrong there, of course, but I kind of look at like a Brian Flores defense. And while his defense is very good and very solid, I feel like if you sell out to just blitz Jayden Daniels to death, he's going to pick you apart and he's going to do things that are going to be able to beat you. The Detroit Lions, with all their injuries, I'm not sure how scary they remain to be all along or throughout the playoffs. And the Green Bay Packers, especially without Jair Alexander, I think they're a lot more vulnerable. So it's less a matter of how good do I think the Washington Commanders are, while I do think they're very good. And it's more so I just think the NFC East, there's not really a juggernaut right now mostly because of the injuries that the Lions have suffered.
Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys, who have absolutely nothing to play for as a team, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be trying hard in week 18 against their old friend, Dan Quinn. We'll discuss the Cowboys next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories last year was attending a comedy show with my wife. It was absolutely incredible. The energy was fantastic. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. There's so many different features in the app that I love. One of my favorites is you can toggle the all-in pricing so you know your total up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, they have the panoramic view of your seat, so you can get a great look at what your seat is going to look like in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL, just the way it's spelled, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are breaking down the Week 18 matchup between these two NFC East rivals. And David, let's talk about the Cowboys side of things. Now, not a lot to play for. They were just embarrassed by Philadelphia last week, but they did beat the Commanders earlier in the year in Washington in one of the more exciting games of the year. Well, the fourth quarter, the first three quarters were not so exciting. The Cowboys don't have anything to play for. However, you have Mike McCarthy coaching his last game on his contract. You have Mike Zimmer coaching the last game on his contract. You have several players in this game who are playing their last games on their final contract, including Jordan Lewis, the Cowboys star slot corner, Osa Odighizuwa, Rico Dowdle, the Cowboys undrafted free agent running back who ran for 1,000 yards. So while it's not a big game for the team, it's a big game for the coaches and the players. And with this game being at home, I expect the Cowboys to show a lot of intensity and energy. Does that mean it's going to translate into a win? No, but I don't think Dallas is just going to lay down in this one.
Yeah, no, I don't expect them to either. And I've actually got a little bit of a conspiracy theory the Cowboys fans are not going to like hearing. Look, every single person that followed, quote unquote, Dan Quinn to Washington, Dan Quinn doesn't say they followed him and they say that they came with them, right? So that kind of just kind of reemphasizes the coach that Dan Quinn is. But they all talked about, including Bobby Wagner, who didn't come from Dallas, obviously, but did come along with Dan Quinn. They all talked about wanting to follow the man. You know what I mean? The man is better than the coach, but the coach is pretty great too, and all wanted to do it. Well, listen, the Washington Commanders could use another good slot defender this coming off season to keep Mikey Sanders-Hill and Marshawn Lattimore outside.
Don't even suggest.
Dan Quinn on Wednesday. Dan Quinn had a lot of good things to say about Rico Dowdle and how he really just needs to be able to stay healthy and get his opportunities to get on the map a little bit more. So I'm just saying, some of these guys, whether it's in the forefront of their mind, whether it's intentional, they may also be auditioning to rejoin Dan Quinn on the other side of this rivalry. I'm just saying, there's needs, there's players coming available. They know each other.
Washington has endless amount of cap space this offseason.
Yeah,
I will say, a lot of times when you see guys leaving free agency, they do end up going to division rivals. This isn't just a Dallas Washington thing, because generally teams like signing guys that they know, that they play twice a year, that they're familiar with, that they talk to after the game. So it's not. We see this across the NFL. So I wouldn't be surprised if Washington this offseason does target a Jordan Lewis or a Rico Dowdle or Osa Odighizuwa. Yeah. But again, I think this is a big game for McCarthy because he wants to get that bad taste out of his mouth in the Philadelphia game. And if he can beat the Commanders in Week 18, a playoff team that's playing for something, and leave the season with a record of 8-9, I know that's not great, but considering all of the injuries they had this year, I think that would give Mike McCarthy a lot of leverage, not only with Dallas, but maybe with some other potential teams out there that are looking for a head coach. I think teams like the Raiders, the Bears, even Jacksonville, if they fire Doug Peterson, all could look at Mike McCarthy. I think all of these coaches have a lot of pride. They're going to want to show that here on Sunday.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And then, even the guys who are going to be around, like Michael Parsons, we just talked about him, like he's not going to roll over and play dead for anybody. No. You know what I mean? And I know Jerry Jones isn't, being committed to any decision right now. And I get that. But at the same time, I don't know Jerry as well as you do and as well as the rest of the Cowboys media guys do. But when I hear him talk about not knowing what he's going to do with Mike McCarthy right now, I believe him. I don't think that decision is necessarily being made or been made. So when you have a situation like this, like you said, it's a division rivalry. It's the division rivalry as far as history is concerned. And yeah, it's a team that's about to go into the playoffs. And if you can get that right and get it done without some of your star players on the field, then it does, lend at least a little bit of argument when you sit down at the table, if you sit down at the table to say, look, I've got this thing going in the right direction.
And one of the things that Mike McCarthy has done really well during his time in Dallas is win in the division. Right now, the Cowboys are 3-2. They beat the Giants twice. Obviously, they beat Washington earlier in the year. I think it looks really good on his resume. Hey, we went 4-2 in a down year in our division. We played several of those games without our starting quarterback. Again, I'm not predicting that the Cowboys are going to win, but we see other. Go look at FanDuel right now and look at some of the point spreads, and you can see which teams are quote unquote laying down. Right now, Washington is a 4.5-point favorite on the road here. That does not indicate like this is going to be a blowout game or anything like we see with Baltimore, Cleveland, where that spread got up to 18.5. Like Dallas is going to play hard in this game. How much is that going to matter because of the lack of talent on the field on both sides of the ball? We'll see. But I do expect the Cowboys to play with a lot of heart.
Yeah, I mean, basically the Commanders are getting a point for every win more they have, over Dallas right now, and then the half to make it interesting for FanDuel so they can go one way or the other. Nobody likes a tie, right? So, but typically an 11-win team that's going in the playoffs, a 7-win team that's not going to the playoffs, you would expect that spread to be a little bit higher. But, the big thing for Washington to remember is while that fourth quarter, like you mentioned, was extremely exciting and had a lot of big plays in it, some good, some bad for both sides, obviously more good for the Cowboys since they came away from the win. If you're on the Washington Commanders side of this thing, you just have to remember, if you play clean football, and that's kind of the message this entire season, you win that game. They started their first 5 drives all started in Dallas Cowboys territory. That is absolutely unheard of. And I don't know the statistic on the last time a team started their first 5 possessions in opposing territory and only came away with 3 points and lost that game. But I guarantee you, there's not a lot of teams in the NFL history who have done that, who have started the game 5 times in a row in opposing territory and then end up losing that game. Typically, that's a one-way ticket to a blowout. You know what I mean? So if you're the Washington Commanders, well, you can look at it and say, listen, we had them right where we want them, and we let them off the hook, to quote, legendary coaches of the past, right? So this time, the key is don't let them off the hook, right? Get them right where you want them again. I'm not saying you're going to get 5 possessions to start the game in Cowboys territory, but put them in the position you want them in. When you get them there, take advantage, execute, and come away with the win that you really do need. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, being the number 6 seed is better than being the number 7 seed. And this team is all about being the best team they can be. Now, the cherry on top being that you don't have to go to Philly in the first round is great, but I don't think that's the main motivation. The main motivation is just being the best Washington Commanders team you can, and getting 12 wins is always going to be the best option.
Last thing for the Cowboys side, I think, before we talk about some keys to victory, there has been a lot of division with the Cowboys fandom about how to go about the last 2 months, right? Like as soon as Dak went down and it was pretty clear like this wasn't a playoff team, you had obviously a section of Cowboy fans that wanted them to tank, quote unquote, tank. And then you had another section
franchise will never do,
which an NFL franchise will never do. And then you had another section wanted them just to try to win these games, right? Like try to develop a winning culture. Don't be one of these teams. Let's pick on the Giants, Patricia's Giants, where you're just thought of as a dumpster fire and nobody wants to go there. They wanted to see this Cowboys team battle and become competitive, even if they know they wasn't going to make a playoff push. I think like their win against Washington earlier in the year, against Tampa Bay on Sunday night, those were good quality wins that made you at least feel good about the future of this team. Having said that, week 18, with no CeeDee Lamb, with no Dak, no Trayvon Diggs, no Zach Martin, we'll see who else gets ruled out. Looking at the draft order, David, you can see the Cowboys could get up to like 11, 12. With a win, they're like back down to 17 or so. I think most Cowboy fans are like pulling for their team to play well and lose. It's just funny that the way that this shifted. This is the ultimately meaningless game for Dallas. I have a feeling most Cowboy fans are going to be hoping that it's close, but Dallas doesn't win.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always interesting to look back at it, and I had the same conversation with Commanders fans this time last year. I said, listen, the Washington Commanders are not going to tank. Like, they're not like Ron Rivera is not going to go out there and lose a game on purpose, all this other stuff. And then, of course, you end up with Jayden Daniels and the number 2 overall pick, and you're through the roof, and it looks like you have your next franchise quarterback and all this stuff. And you think about it, man, like the New York Jets, like you're a Greg Zuerlein missed field goal from missing on Jayden Daniels. You know what I mean? Like this team might have JJ McCarthy and a veteran quarterback. I don't know, Marcus Mariota starting while JJ is injured on the bench. versus Jayden Daniels. And then I don't know who it would have been, the New England Patriots, I think, end up with Jayden Daniels, and like the entire just infrastructure of the NFL and just the entire storyline completely shifts. That is really how close this league can be. But again, man, if you want to attract free agents, if you want to keep key players, if you want coaches that are worth the crap, you have to come into every single game saying, we're going out here to win. We're not going out here to worry about the future, because if you do that, if you start tanking, all you're doing is setting up a better platform for the guy that's going to replace you next season.
All right, let's talk about some keys to victories for the Cowboys and the Commanders going into Week 18. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on NFL futures, and they're still out there. You can bet on the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, all available on FanDuel right now. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's a crossover edition of the Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Commanders podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, David, let's do some keys to victory. What do the Commanders need to do on Sunday to get a W?
Well, first things they got to do is they got to play smart against potentially unknown quarterback, right? Obviously, there's a potential there. I don't know how sure Cowboys side of this is that Trey Lance is going to get some playing time. Is it Cooper Rush?
Yeah.
I just know there's conversations of Trey Lance maybe getting some reps, maybe getting a start. I don't know what it is, but Dan Quinn did say on Wednesday that they are planning for Trey Lance more than they did the first time around. Like first time around, they watched a little bit. They're going to watch more about Trey Lance. This time, that again, it just kind of feeds into the conversation of they want to win this game. You know what I mean? This isn't just lip service. Like they're going to prep for Cooper Rush. They're also going to prep for Trey Lance because they don't know what's going to happen with the Dallas Cowboys as the course of this game goes on. You got to start fast, rest late, right? We kind of talked about that a little bit too. And again, I don't think you're going to get 5 possessions in Cowboys territory to start this game, but if whatever opportunities you get early in this game, you have to capitalize on them. If it's a turnover, you got to punish the Cowboys for giving the ball away. You got to make sure they don't get any takeaways. And then maybe if things are going the right way, you can rest some of your key players later in the game. You got to play clean, man. That ultimately is what the Washington Commanders have been searching for a while now, is a game where all 3 phases just play smart, clean football and go out there and get a 60-minute team victory. Those are the 3 things they need to do this weekend.
For the Cowboys, it's all about starting fast. And we talk about this every week with on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Most of these games, you can tell like 15 minutes in real time how it's going to go for Dallas. Like if they jump out to a lead, which they did against Tampa Bay, it was 13-0 instantly in that game. You felt pretty good about their chances of surviving. But in some of these other games, they get down by 7 points, 10 points. They just don't have the offense, nor are they built that way on defense to climb back in these games. So if you can get off to a hot start, and I even be like, hey, you force a 3 and out, and then you get a field goal, right? Like just even a start like that, keep yourself in this game as long as possible. Maybe something will break your way like it did the first time around with a Kevontae Turpin, a kick return touchdown, or a turnover. Number 2, you got to stop the run. You cannot let Jayden Daniels and Brian Robinson run all over you and control the clock. That is an easy way for the Commanders to take control of this game. And then on offense, the Cowboys have to find ways to create explosive plays. And that's going to be really hard without CeeDee Lamb and really hard with Cooper Rush at quarterback. And maybe we'll see Trey Lance, but whether that means some trick plays or more touches for Kevontae Turpin, or heaven forbid they use Jonathan Mingo down the field a little bit, they need to find a way to create these 30, 40, 50-yard chunk plays because, David, this offense just isn't good enough to put together 12, 13, 14 play drives. One of the worst red zone offenses in the league. They have to hit big plays to stay in it.
Yeah, no, I mean that all makes sense. And you know, I think again, like mine, you kind of look at it, right? Obviously, the first one is really about the Dallas Cowboys specifically, but the rest of this is just about ending the season the right way for the Washington Commanders entering the playoffs. And it's not an intention, it's not my intention to just look past the Dallas Cowboys. Fortunately, if I look past the Dallas Cowboys, it doesn't really matter because from the press box, I'm not scoring any points anyway. But that's really kind of where we are. You know what I mean? I was telling you this before we recorded my Wednesday episode, starting off with talking about the wild card round, not the Dallas Cowboys. It's just a situation this late in the season. But to say that as the host of the Locked On Commanders, don't take that as a Cowboys fan listening to this crossover episode to think, oh, the Commanders are sleeping on the Dallas Cowboys. That's absolutely not happening.
Last thing before we go, how does the food in the Dallas Cowboys press box rank compared to the other stadium?
Oh, it's the best.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's the best. It's the number one press box in the league. Listen, I've been telling my other beat reporters here, like, if there was nothing on the line for the Commanders heading into Week 18, I might actually skip the Dallas trip this year. As Marcus, I'm self-funded, so I'm like, well, I might save myself a little bit of money instead. Sure. But also, it's Jerry's World, man. And Jerry's World is my favorite place in the entire National Football League because you can hate the Cowboys as a Commanders fan, or you can hate the rivalry, whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, man, Uncle Jerry does it right. You know what I mean? We went there for Thanksgiving last year, and it was the best Thanksgiving game I've ever covered. So also the only Thanksgiving game I've ever covered. But anyway, Tampa is a close second. You know what I mean? Tampa is very nice as well, is a close second. But yeah, AT&T does it the best, which I'm happy for because Josh Harris is under, he's going to eventually develop a new stadium, and he's a lifelong Washington fan. Washington doesn't like Dallas, so he wants to one-up Dallas. He's got to do better than Jerry. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Josh unveils, whether it's 2030 or whenever it comes. I'm excited to see what it is because hopefully he's looking to top Jerry Jones.
So there you go, Cowboys fans. You have it. We're at least number one in something in the NFL this year, which is the spread. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making this crossover edition of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys podcast your first listen every single day. Again, check out the new Locked On NFL show, 2 shows every single day, available wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow David on Twitter /X at DHarrison82. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy the Week 18 matchup, and we will see you right back here on Friday.